I'm just here to welcome you. Before we bring Satwant on, I thought it would just be important to sort of tell you about the day, because we're trying to do something different here. Certainly anyone who's going to speak to you today could speak to you all day about what they know about hoarding, and that is important. We do that every day. We deliver training. We go around the country. But all of us, Satwant, Margaret, Heather, have been doing this work for about a decade. And still many of the same problems that we were talking about 10 years ago are still taking place. So what we want from today is a discussion about what's really happening out there. When we go into our workshops, we're going to talk about what's happening. We're going to come back with a question to the panel. The panel is not only going to be the experts on the stage, but people in the audience as well. So all of the user groups and all of that will be feeding in. And then we want to take that back and find some solutions and go back into those workshops and agree a pathway forward. So one thing that we are committed to at this conference is the I Count campaign. I and my colleagues travel the country, and every time I land, I ask, is there a box in your data that says hoarding behavior? And I'd say 90% of the time the answer is no. How can we manage such a complex problem if we don't know how big it is? So we're asking everyone to sign the pledge that's online, the I Count campaign. Also at the end of the day, we're going to ask you to go back to your service, go to your GP, go to your social work team, and ask them if they have this box. By the end of next year, we'd like to take that from 90% of people who don't have it to 90% of people who do. That being said, I think if Satwant is around, where is he? There he is, great, I'll introduce the man. He is our clinical director and a wonderful human being. I thank you again for your patience and enjoy the day.
Good morning and welcome. I would like to thank Megan and HoardingUK for inviting me to speak today at this inaugural conference. I think it's very exciting that we are having a conference in London, and it's the first conference on hoarding disorder, and at the start of Hoarding Awareness Week. We need to acknowledge the importance of Hoarding Awareness Week, which has been taking place over the last few years and has helped to highlight the condition, raising awareness both at the professional and community level. And most importantly, it has highlighted the need for the development of services within this area. It is an area that's still lacking. I'm speaking on resilience today, and you may wonder why on the choice of topic, considering that this is a conference on hoarding disorder. We've had a great deal of media coverage and awareness on hoarding disorder, though there still needs more to be done. However, it is also important to consider the other aspects which can help individuals on the journey of reclaiming their space and life. It is a journey there are no shortcuts, and we have to take the journey to reach our vision as to how we would like that space and our lives to be. We have only one life, and it's so important to make a great job of that life. One shot, make use of it. We need to ask ourselves, what is meant by resilience? It is a term that is used in many different contexts. Recently on LinkedIn, a social media platform for professionals, they've been posting on resilience, highlighting the importance of it. I would like to think resilience is the ineffable quality that allows individuals to be knocked down by life and come back stronger. It is not allowing failure to overcome you and drain your resolve, but akin to raising from the ashes. Resilience is the capacity of an individual to maintain their self-esteem despite the events they may have experienced. Getting up again onto one's feet after being knocked down. In the most basic sense, resilience can be seen as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, a sense of robustness, and the ability to spring back. Resilience is also about the process adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, stress, and hardship, which we all have gone throughout our lives. Let's consider those individuals in the war-torn countries. Despite the experiences, they've been able to pick themselves up and move on. It's been tough, but they have done it. We can see that resilience has a wide range of definitions, but essentially, I would like to define resilience as the innate ability, something that's built in within us. We are born with that ability to be resilient. Look at babies, for example, how resilient they are. They may fall, yet they spring back. Yeah? It's the innate ability to move forward and engage with life. It's not just about recovering, it's about living. It's about developing better coping mechanisms which we develop through our experiences. Experiences are highly important. Having a different outlook of life, each experience will give us a different way of looking at things. Fostering relationships, we are social animals, we need to connect. Engaging with resources and self-reliance. Yes, we have lots of support outside there, but we also need to think about our self-reliance. As a therapist, I feel there's not enough attention paid to this innate quality that we possess to help us engage with our difficulties constructively and enhance our ability to cope and deal with them effectively. I'd like to play you a short clip from Gone with the Wind.
They're not going to lick me. I'm going to live through this, and when it's all over, I'll never be hungry again. No, nor any of my folk. If I have to lie, steal, cheat, or kill, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
So many of us have watched this movie many times. I've not seen it for a number of years, but I remember that scene so vividly. Watching the scene, you can actually feel the resolve and determination of not letting the situation or the cards dealt to Scarlett due to the Civil War affect her. And she has had the resolve to come back with a vengeance, not only for herself, but for her kin, for her family too. This is resilience, not letting the situation beat you down or allowing you to give up on life despite our difficulties. How many of us here today have felt like giving up when faced with difficult situations, especially when dealing with our hoarding issues? Hands, a show of hands, please. Let us consider what impacts our resilience. I'm going to take a cognitive behavioral perspective on this. The cognitive behavioral therapy model proposes, I use the word proposes, as all therapeutic models are hypotheses. The hypotheses are based on the initial research findings that are conducted by therapists themselves, our clinicians. For example, Beck, one of the fathers of cognitive therapy, whose initial informal research from the observations from his patients suffering from depression found his patients appeared to present with a similar type of thinking patterns which appeared to be distorted. For example, a glass half empty or half full. The initial findings of the informal research led to formal research undertaken to understand the phenomenon better, which we now understand as distorted thinking, and the development of appropriate interventions for them. Going back to the cognitive behavioral model proposes that individuals tend to overestimate the situation that they're having to face. For example, overestimating how difficult it would be to deal with an event, and they tend to estimate the ability to cope with or deal with the presenting issue. A good example of this, when individuals who have hoarding issues start to deal with the clutter that surrounds them, usually the initial thought is, this is too much, which leads to a feeling of feeling overwhelmed, high levels of stress and anxiety, and underestimating the ability to start dealing with the clutter or deal with the anxiety or stress they're facing, resulting in the individuals not engaging with the process of dealing with their hoarding issues, feeling disempowered, and a sense that they're only able to cope with the issues by having the appropriate help. This in turn reinforces the sense of not being able to deal with issues and undermining their self-resilience. The second component of the cognitive behavioral model proposes is the tendency of individuals to engage in avoidance. How many of us engage in avoidance when dealing with issues? Yeah? Forget about hoarding disorder, life in general. Having a discussion with someone about a sensitive issue, we tend to avoid it and leave it to a point that it is breaking point. Yeah? For example, having, as I said about discussion with another, we often try to avoid those discussions for the fear of the reactions and the emotional impact and our ability to deal with them. In the case of hoarding disorder, the feeling of being overwhelmed leads to the avoidance of dealing with the clutter and presenting issues surrounding it. This reinforces the sense of not being able to cope and erodes one's resilience of being capable or able to deal with the issues and associated feelings. The third component which erodes resilience is the act of engaging in safety-seeking behaviors. These are behaviors that we engage to cope with. A simple way of understanding these are behaviors we engage to avoid or reduce the perceived distress that we might feel. In the case of hoarding, individuals move items that are saved around the environment instead of decluttering or discarding them. The excessive checking that takes place and checking with others to reduce the fear that something might be thrown away in error. However, it increases and reinforces the fears we hold. These behaviors erode our resilience and ability to cope, and it creates doubts, reinforces to the individual that they're not able to deal with the clutter or their hoarding issues. Let's now understand the factors that impact individuals recognizing their resilience. We all have expectations, and it is normal to have expectations. Like you have expectations for today, what you expect to receive from this conference. However, the expectations we hold are high and rigid, and it causes us to be excessively hard on ourselves and impacts our motivation and our ability to deal with the task at hand. So we have a high level of expectation how things should be. If that expectation is not going to be met, we end up not being able to carry out what we're wanting to do. So an example, having the expectation of needing a space to be cleared within a very short period of time and it's taking longer than usual, it becomes more difficult. Individuals experience the feeling they have not achieved it or not able to achieve it and reinforce their inability to cope with their hoarding issues. The rigid nature of our expectations do not allow us to recognize what we have achieved, rather than we tend to focus on what we have not achieved. Linked with the high expectations are our high personal standards, which tend to be rigid and difficult to achieve. Not meeting these personal standards lead to us beating ourselves up being hard on ourselves, discounting what we've achieved, and which leads us to feel low and in turn impacts on our ability to manage and cope with the issues that we are facing. Disqualifying our achievement tends to erode our ability to deal with issues. It is not uncommon for individuals to discount what has been achieved. It was nothing at all. I only managed it as someone has helped me. If I did not have the housing officer requesting a visit, I would not have done it. Often, we forget what we've managed or accomplished and the effort that's taken to get there, which again undermines our resilience. Self-talk is an interesting activity. We all engage in it. So, for example, we can either talk ourselves into engaging in or avoiding a task, buying something or not buying something. How many of us question the value of undertaking a task before you even start it? Show of hands? Yeah, we all do. We often ask ourselves the question, will I have enough time to complete this task? We often tend to talk ourselves into doing or avoiding activities in the case of hoarding, saying to ourselves, it's far too much to deal for me to deal with it alone, leads us not engaging with the process of decluttering and the feeling that we're not capable with dealing with that clutter. Being modest is a nice attribute, however, it's also a negative aspect as it discounts the challenges we have had to deal in order to get where we've got to. For example, saying it was nothing at all. I managed to get rid of some of the items because of the housing officer was going to visit. The fact that you managed to do it says that you can do it and you're capable, but you tend to discount it by not recognizing what you've achieved, and yet again reinforces your inability to cope, undermining your resilience. How many of us tend to put ourselves down? Show of hands? Yeah, me too. Yeah. This is often a result of the inability to recognize what we've achieved or able to do. We forget how far we've come in life and the challenges that we've had to face to get here. Our attributional style, based on our beliefs and values, high expectations, demands, lead us to discount what we've achieved, challenges which we have faced, to all contribute to the erosion of our resilience. Let us turn our attention to some of the factors that have helped us shape in the way we look and make sense of situation. Life factors play an important role, and we all experience life in our experiences. Some of our experiences are positive and negative. It's the meaning that we place on the experiences that impact the way we engage with the world around us. For example, for those of us who have had negative experiences with the authorities, when faced with the situation that we have to deal with an issue with the authorities, we will often have a negative view and how it will turn out. So, for example, having to deal with environmental health, having had a negative experience, and when environmental health comes back to do a visit, our tendency is going to be thinking about it in a very negative way. The meaning we place on situations has an important role in either maintaining or eroding our resilience. Our outlook helps us to have a perspective as how we would like situations to be. Those of us who have a pessimistic outlook will often see things differently as someone who has a positive outlook. We look at the same situation and have different interpretation based on our outlook. Like, for example, the glass half empty or half full. Having a positive outlook helps us to get on with life as it instills hopes and the possibility of change. Recognizing what is going well, no matter how small, and using every situation, event, or even a negative one as a learning opportunity. We learn from our experiences. Children learn from experiences. Our attitude and aptitude we bring to situations has an important role to play as how we deal with issues. If we bring in an attitude that nothing is going to change, our aptitude is one of resignation. Why bother as nothing is going to change. Having a positive attitude instills a positive aptitude in dealing with our issues. It helps us develop the approach of being proactive in dealing with situations rather than a reactive which causes anxiety and increases stress. Having a positive attributional style makes a difference in the way we view situations, which helps us move on. Consider the range of thinking styles we engage in. Black and white thinking. It's not about racism. It is but looking at situations as extremes. There are no gray areas. Remember the book 50 Shades of Grey? How much excitement it caused. Yeah? For example, I'm either able or not able to. There's no room for flexibility. Labeling ourselves as not able to do something reinforces our sense of not being able to cope. Mental filtering, an interesting concept. We tend to remember aspects depending on how we're feeling. When we are angry, do you remember the times when, let's say you're angry with your partner, do you remember the happy times, or do you remember every time that you've had a disagreement with your partner? So we tend to go back to the situations that resonate with the way we feel. Disqualifying the positive. Here, yes, there's the yes and buts. Yes, I did it, but only with help. Then we also have this issue of mind reading, knowing how others are going to react or how they're going to feel towards us, which stops us from moving on. Okay? Emotional reasoning, using our emotions as evidence. Emotions are not facts. Catastrophizing, thinking of the worst case scenario. So you get a letter in the post that the fire service is going to come and visit. Straight away, there's going to be a problem, there's going to be issues here. Demands, the demands we place on ourselves. I only can do the work I need to do, I only can declutter if I have all this in place. Without these demands, without this conditions in place, I'm unable to deal with it. Overgeneralizing, thinking again, one situation tarnishes everything. Then we have blame personalizing, where we blame and personalize everything to ourselves or to others. Fortune telling, where we know how things are going to be, how things are going to turn out without even trying. And most importantly, low frustration tolerance, exit stage left. How many of us here today, when we are having to deal with our environment, the clutter within an environment, rather to be outdoors and spend more times outdoors than indoors? Show of hands? Yeah. So that's an example of low frustration tolerance. It is now natural to have expectations. However, having high and rigid expectations affects us. How many of us here have been out for a meal with an expectation for the meal to be good? Yes? Yeah? And then you have in your mind, I'm going to pay this money, the meal is going to be really tasty. And when you get there, it doesn't match the way you would like it to be. What do you end up feeling? Disappointed. Yes? So that is based on our expectations. How do we react? It is because it is more helpful to have a preference rather than expectations. Preferences are flexible and allow us to adapt to situations as they arise and deal with them proactively. I would prefer this, how it should be, or how it could be. Acceptance of things acceptance of how things are play a vital role as how we deal with them. We all have had experiences where we have not been able to accept a situation as it is. The impact is that we experience high levels of distress, which can be traumatic. Having an attitude of acceptance, the reality of the situation helps us cope and manage better. For example, I have a Russian friend of mine who had to fly back to Russia as his brother was seriously ill. His brother died, which is sad. On his return, I met up with him. And I said, I'm so sorry to hear your loss about your brother dying. And he just said to me, that's life. End of conversation. That's his way of, they accept it, they move on. When I'm out with him during winter and I say it's cold, he looks at me and says, what do you expect? It's winter. End of conversation. Which is true. It is the acceptance, that's what it is. And I always think of that. When I still see him, I always look at him and I smile and I laugh. I said, so matter of fact. But it helps people move on. We all have limitations. Recognize your personal limitations as they allow you to be kinder to yourself and to engage with your hoarding issues within your ability in a stepwise manner. Small steps and gradually build up. Accept that it's okay to seek and ask for help, support. Human beings rely on each other. We are not solitary animals. We are not solitary beings, but social animals. We now turn to our attention to our internal resources. It is an area we often forget. As we, as individuals, become dependent on external factors and fail to recognize in our capacity to cope and manage. Focus on your ability to manage your emotions. We experience a range of emotions, some difficult than others, but we are still able to cope with them. We are faced with uncertainty and doubts. That is life. But it's the way we manage that impacts on us. We need to acknowledge the challenges we face and the impact it has on us. Realize we have the ability to be compassionate, show kindness, and nurture ourselves. It may be easier to recognize your internal resources in relation to how you support others. As individuals, we often find it far easier to support others than ourselves. Transfer those skills in helping us manage the way we feel discomfort and dealing with our uncertainties, recognizing the occasions where we have done so. Learn to step back and to allow this to take place. We show compassion and kindness and nurture others. It's about turning that around and bestowing the compassion, kindness, and nurturing ourselves. In addition to the internal resources, recognize your external resources, those who you can rely on, support agencies, for example, HoardingUK, support workers, social services. Identify the choices that are available to you, and the choices provide you opportunities. A negative experience of an external resource, example, a support service, does not mean every experience will be negative. Be open and accepting. Consider mutual and where you support. Consider mutual aid, where you can support others who in turn can support you. We all know having a buddy is an excellent external resource who we can rely on. Recognize, be familiar, and engage with both your internal and external resources, and use them to deal with the situations as they arise. Be aware of the impact of procrastination and the function engaging in it. What is it you're trying to achieve? What are you trying to avoid? Question yourself. How is the avoidance helping you? What is the impact of procrastinating? Learn to recognize when you're feeling overwhelmed. Step back, take a breather, and re-engage again to reinforce your ability to cope. If it is too challenging, break it into smaller bite sizes which have become more manageable. It is like eating smaller bites. We manage better and don't get choked. Problem solve on your own initially. If needed, then seek your external resource to help out. Problem solve builds your resilience as it gives you proof that you're able to deal with the situation. Remember to look after yourself. Only you can look after yourself. Eating well, a balanced diet, ensuring that you adequate rest and sleep. We are too familiar with the lack of adequate rest and sleep leads us to feel vulnerable. Exercise both physically and mentally. If you drink alcohol, drink in moderation, as it does impact your mood and anxiety. As well as we know, alcohol impacts your mood, and the withdrawal can cause you to feel anxious. Engage with others. The social network helps you reclaim your life, and engaging in activities improve your mood and bring a sense of enjoyment. Recognize your attributes. Each and every one of us has our own unique attributes. Recognize them. What am I good at? For it may be that you may be good at listening, cooking, nurturing. Ask yourself, what makes the other person engage with me? What is it about me makes them connect with me? What makes me the person that I am? You obviously touch others in a way that they want to be connected with you. What makes you the way you are in this world? Essentially asking about yourself, your unique self. Recognize you. Let's consider using your resilience in dealing with your clutter, saving behaviors, and hoarding issues. Recognize in everything that we do, there will be challenges. For example, getting here on time today. Accept the challenges rather than thinking of them as the worst case scenario. How helpful is it thinking of the worst case scenario? It tends to make us more stressed and find it more challenging to deal with it. Recognize your abilities and skills and how you can apply this to help you with your challenges. Recognize your internal resources. Connect with your external resources. Asking for the appropriate support. Visualize how would you like your space and life to be. Activate that vision, which will lead to the challenge of having to deal with the clutter, saving and hoarding behaviors. Break the challenges into smaller sizes, chunks, and which makes it more manageable. Use your problem-solving skills. Be flexible and creative. Necessity is the mother of creativity. Flexibility allows you to engage better. Rigidity impedes progress. High standards and expectations. To conclude, and thinking outside the box, each one of us has our unique inbuilt resilience. I would like to stress that develop an optimistic outlook and attitude. Incorporate an aptitude of can-do and having the willingness to try. This is the most important thing. Try, rather than I cannot. By trying, it allows one to recognize the strengths, the deficits, and the support needed. Without trying, you will not know. How do we know if something is tasty? Unless we try by eating it. If we don't eat, you will never know. Don't use the emotions as a guide, as this often leads to avoidance for fear of experiencing negative emotions, for they are familiar. Make them familiar, welcome them in, because you know them of old. They're not new. They're not hitting you every time. They're there. You know them. They're like old friends. They'll be less threatening. There are no negative outcomes, for each outcome is a learning experience. Each experience helps us build on our resilience and our strengths. Take the risk of trying something new. Develop a habit of taking risks each day. In relation to your saving behaviors and hoarding issues, for example, not checking before discarding. Recognize and validate what has gone well and reinforce by doing it again and again. Practice makes it stronger. This helps you build your internal and external resources. Practice mutual aid as its way of sharing, reinforcing your strengths and resilience. Be flexible and creative in how you deal with your saving and hoarding issues. Remember, engage with the external world and activities you enjoy, as this will help as you reclaim your space and life. I would like to leave this morning with a quote that I picked up from LinkedIn. Whenever you find yourself doubting how far you can go, just remember how far you've come, remembering everything you have faced, all the battles you've won, and all the fears you've overcome. I think that's a very beautiful quote that sums everything up. And thank you for listening to me today.